A lot of AM4 users are looking to upgrade their builds for Escape from Tarkov, and since it's such a heavily CPU-bound game, choosing the right processor is the most important decision you'll make. If the 7800X3D and 9800X3D are out of your budget, should you go for the reigning AM4 champion, or is it worth making the jump to AM5? Today I'm going to be comparing the 5700X3D versus the Ryzen 7 7700X. Let's break it down and find out which upgrade makes the most sense for Tarkov. For this test, I used 64 gigs of RAM on both systems and used an RTX 3080 10GB for the GPU to make it realistic in terms of the types of builds people would have in this range. Detailed specs are in the video description below. I ran a -30 undervolt on the 5700X3D and a +150 boost clock override and -25 undervolt on the 7700X. I ran routes on customs and streets in offline mode to get baseline numbers and then in online mode to get real world numbers. I tested in 1080 and 1440. Since I'm on a 3080, I used my pure 80 preset, which is basically high textures and low shadows, but with DLSS balance to lower the GPU load since this is a CPU comparison. Alright, so let's get into the results. Starting with streets in offline mode at 1080, the 5700X3D averaged 104 FPS while the 7700X averaged 98 FPS. The 5700X3D had around 10% higher 1% lows, while 0.1% lows were nearly identical. At 1440 in offline mode, both CPUs averaged 98 FPS with 1% and 0.1% lows so close that they were within margin of error. In actual gameplay, the difference between the two was barely noticeable. Switching to online mode at 1080, the 5700X3D held a slight lead, averaging 85 FPS compared to 81 FPS on the 7700X. The lows were within 10% of each other, but again, the 5700X3D had a slight edge. In 1440 online, both CPUs averaged 80 FPS, and 1% and 0.1% lows were nearly identical, within just a few FPS of each other. The 5700X3D technically had slightly better numbers, but in practice, the actual gameplay experience felt virtually the same. Moving on to customs and offline mode at 1080, the 5700X3D had a 5% lead in both average FPS and 1% lows, but the 7700X had slightly higher 0.1% lows, making it feel just a bit smoother during gameplay. In 1440 offline mode, the 5700X3D again held a small lead in average FPS, but the 7700X had slightly better 1% and 0.1% lows. In actual gameplay in 1440, both CPUs performed very closely with no major difference in feel. So far, the 5700X3D has led in all the tests, but in 1080 in online mode and customs, this was where the 7700X pulled ahead, leading in both average FPS and 1% and 0.1% lows. In 1440 online, the 7700X averaged 120 FPS compared to 112 on the 5700X3D, with better lows across the board. In actual gameplay, the 7700X felt ever so slightly smoother, making it the stronger performer in this particular scenario by a hair. So which one should you choose? If you're already on AM4, the 5700X3D is an absolute no-brainer. It's hands down the best performance per dollar upgrade for Tarkov for any AM4 user. The 7700X along with other vanilla Ryzen 7000 chips perform about the same as the 5700X3D in Tarkov, but moving to AM5 requires a new motherboard and DDR5 RAM, making it a bigger investment. Now, what a lot of people ask me is, what about future-proofing? Personally, I don't really buy into the whole future-proofing mindset. I always build for what I'm going to use it for right now. Why do I do this? Because when you spend extra money on hardware you won't fully utilize today, by the time you actually need more performance, the way that hardware moves these days, new parts will be out, prices will have dropped, and older high-end components will feel mid-tier. So what seemed future-proof back then won't feel all that future-proof anymore. So for me, I always say save your cash, build for what you need today, and upgrade when the time comes. But hey, if knowing you can swap in a better CPU later gives you peace of mind, I won't argue with you. But for me personally, I always recommend spending less now, reassessing later. Alright, that's all I got for this one. I hope this quick dive comparison was helpful for you. If you found it useful, drop a like and subscribe for more Tarkov and hardware content. If you have questions, feel free to join the Pyurologie Discord. I'm always happy to chat. And if you're looking for one-on-one consultation or optimization help, that's now available as a perk for Tier 2 YouTube members. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.